Hello everybody, I'm James Leichter. Welcome to this month's webinar. I'm the founder and president of Aptora, and did you know we are the oldest software company in the HVAC, plumbing, and electrical space? We were founded in 1995. We have the same owner, same EIN number. There's companies that have changed hands many times. They don't have the same EIN number. We're the oldest in our space. I just thought I'd point that out. In fact, we're coming up on our anniversary where 20 years ago we sold our first Total Office Manager, the program that we're talking about today. So coming up here soon, we'll celebrate 20 years of selling this software. And before that, it was Flat Rate Plus. And that's how many of you first got hooked up with Aptora. Okay, today we are talking about preferences, settings, security, all the different settings that are in the software. The first question that we get asked is, why are there so many preferences? And when I say preferences, I'm referring to just all the different settings, which could include security in the software. Why are there so many, James? Hear that all the time. There are a lot of them that are related to a difference of opinion. Like, for example, one company once upon a time said, we never want this to happen. And another company said, that's ridiculous. We always want that to happen. It became a preference. A lot of times when people suggest a change in the behavior of the software, we turn it into a preference so we don't bother those who are already used to that workflow or that way of doing things. And of course, we've been around 20 years. As I just mentioned, over the course of 20 years, we've added a lot of preferences and settings to the point where it can be a bit confusing. And that's why we'll talk about it today. The second most common question that we get is, don't you have some kind of easy button or some kind of template for the settings? Isn't there like a button I can push to get the normal settings that most companies use? And the answer to that is no. And the reason why is because of what the question included, and that is that most companies use. We have not really found a set of preferences and settings that would appeal to most companies, being 51% of all those companies. There are that many differences of opinion. Now keep in mind, Total Office Manager would be a lot easier to use if it were custom built for a franchise. So if there was a HVAC, plumbing, electrical franchise out there, then you would follow their rules. You would do things the way they say you have to do them. And there would not be a need for most of the settings and preferences that are in the software because it would be their way or the highway, right? I would imagine it's very easy to use a McDonald's cash register because there's only one way of doing things with that cash register. But with Total Office Manager, we have to accommodate a wide variety of companies. Now, we specialize in HVAC, plumbing, electric, and that's who we focus our workflow on. But within that group, there's a wide range of how everyone does things, and that makes the software more complicated and harder to use. All right, with that in mind, let's get into the software and cover some of the settings and preferences. I have a cheat sheet in front of me here. Before the webinar a couple days ago, I asked my coworkers for their ideas on what preferences and settings to include in today's webinar, knowing that they would have ideas that I didn't have. And wouldn't you know it, none of them had any good ideas. No, I'm kidding. They had great ideas, and I have them written down, and I'll cover those as well as my own. All right, first thing I want to show you is not really a setting or a preference, but since it's a new year and we want to get off to a good start, I thought I'd remind you that there was a company setup checklist, and you'll find it under File, Company Utilities, Setup Checklist right here. When you open it, this opens up. Now, it's kind of like the Workflow Navigator that some of you are used to. Let's go grab that. The Workflow Navigator, it's kind of like that, but it's really designed to navigate you through this setup process. And many of you have used the software for quite a while and you're way past this, but maybe not. There may be some things in here that you didn't know about. So come on in here when you get a chance and go to Company and look at the checklist Each one of these is a shortcut. If you click on it, it'll open a form and look around. There may be information in here that you haven't filled out. And when you're done with it, just check the box to indicate that, yeah, you've reviewed it. The next thing I want to talk about is reviewing our chart of accounts. And we have a shortcut for that right there. So let's click that and open up our chart of accounts. Since it's a new year, it's important that we get off to a good start. And you want to do that by reviewing your chart of accounts. Now I have, for convenience purposes, I have filters in here so that I can just click income, for example, and have a look at my income accounts. And that way I can review income accounts. Inactivate things you don't need, then review your cost of goods sold accounts. And once you've done that, then it's time to review your expenses and so forth. Let's go to the income and cost of goods sold accounts and have a look at these. The reason why I have a filter to show both of them is because I consider them to be very much related, even though they're kind of opposite, aren't they? One is good, money coming in, one's bad, money going out. But they're very much related and should be considered together. It's important, in my opinion, and that's all you're getting, right, is my opinion. It's important, in my opinion, that you have income accounts and matching COGS accounts. So for every income account, you should have a matching cost of goods sold account. But as you can see, I have a lot more COGS accounts than I do income accounts, and that's normal. But you want at least a COGS account for every income account, and then you can have extras. The reason why you might have extras is because rather than just have a cost of goods sold labor, you might want to break out your cost of goods sold labor in much more detail. So you'll end up with more COGS than you did income. But we do want to have an income account and a corresponding COGS account. But why? Several reasons, but one is you want to be able to look at your gross profitability, your gross profit dollars, for each one of those revenue drivers. So for example, you want to keep track of revenue for service agreements, but you also want to keep track of the cost of goods sold for service agreements. Even though your gross profit isn't the whole story, you at least want to be able to see what your gross profit is on service agreements. The same with equipment and labor and subcontractors and so forth. Now, one thing you don't want to do in your chart of accounts is have a department. You don't want equipment replacement, equipment add-on or new construction. You don't want to have parts and materials, new construction, parts and materials, demand service. You don't need to. You just have equipment, labor, parts and materials, supplies, etc., with no mention of the department. And why do you do that? Well, let's open up our departments. You can see we have a shortcut here. Because the software is fully departmentalized. In the software, we have a list of departments. And whenever you deal with money, you have a chance to pick the department. And when you pick the department somewhere in your workflow, that department almost always carries through the workflow without you thinking about it. So for example, you could pick a default department for a job. And then once you have that, you can create work orders, purchase orders, estimates, anything from the job, and it brings the department with it. So you never have to think about selecting the department. Let's say you do design build, you put a job into Total Office Manager, you set the department, you set it and forget it. Everything you create will have that department, and there probably is no reason to pick a different department for that job. When you have a customer and you select demand service, you could have a default department of demand service if you wanted to, or you could have no default department. And that way, when you create a work order, no department will be selected, and that might be good because you want to make sure that someone thinks about selecting the department. You can mark that department selection as a required field, and that way when you create the work order from the customer, there is no department. If they try to save, it will tell them you have to have a department, then they give it some thought. Once that department is selected, like demand service, anything you create from it, such as timesheets or purchase orders, Whether you create that in the field using the app or from the desktop, it will bring that department with it. That's all you have to do to be fully departmentalized. And what's that mean? That means that you have the ability to print an income statement by department. And that means you will be able to see, sure, the gross profit by department, but you will be able to see your net profit by department. And that's the big eye opener, is net profit by department. What are some good departments? This would be my recommendation. Now, we have more than most companies would need because it's easier to just get rid of things or ignore things than it is to add them. But the first thing you want to do is decide if you want to distinguish between residential and commercial work, yes or no. And that usually is your top level, usually the top level. So you can see in my example, I have commercial HVAC and I have residential HVAC. And I also put the word parent in there so that everybody knew that was a header or a parent. You don't want to select that. Underneath, say, residential HVAC, I have demand service, and I have indoor air quality and accessories. I have new construction. We have planned maintenance, which would be service agreement sales, anything scheduled, anything that's planned in advance, not demand service. I have residential replacement and add-on. I have warranty, have a sheet metal shop. And those are my recommendations, and you can see they're similar for the other departments as well. Those are generally my recommendations. And again, you just get rid of what you don't need. You might be in the plumbing business, but you don't do sewer and drain, just inactivate it. Maybe you don't want to distinguish between indoor air quality and accessories. You just want to funnel that into demand service, go right ahead. But that's generally how I recommend things. If you're a small company and you have one trade, such as HVAC, and you do mostly residential, and you do some light commercial, it may not be worth it to distinguish between residential and light commercial. So you wouldn't have residential and light commercial. You would just skip that part. Your header would be HVAC, if even that, because if that's all you do and that's all you want to do, then what you could do is simply have, again, to set this up, you're an HVAC only company, you do residential and some light commercial. Yours could be as simple as demand service. I would recommend indoor air quality and accessories. New construction, if you do it, you would have planned maintenance always, because that's your service agreement sales. And if you're not doing that now, you need to be doing that. Replacement and add-on, and then possibly warranty work. Now, possibly warranty. Why did I say possibly? You see how everybody's different, right? If you collect money for warranty work, for warranty coverage, so for example, you sell an installation for $20,000 and you put money in that install, say $500 to cover future warranty burden, then you want to keep track of that. You do want a department called warranty. If you just encounter warranty like all of us do, and you're not setting aside money for that, then you don't need a department called warranty. But I would recommend you create a warranty department and you set aside money to cover your warranty burden. I recommend that. Now you have to, of course, crawl before you can walk and walk before you can run, but maybe that's something you can get to this year. There are good articles in the help system. If you go to our website, go to the help system, search for warranty reserve. You'll read all about how to set aside money to cover your warranty. Chances are, if you're like most clients I work with, it's going to be 1% or less. So you're going to have typically a penny on the dollar, and that will cover your warranty burden. But it's really important to track that, because nowadays we're selling extended warranties through the factory. They're reimbursing us a fraction of what it costs to actually do the work, and we may not be profitable. Some companies I work with are horrified when they finally can see the net profit on their warranty work and they realize they're getting killed because they are just not collecting enough money for that warranty work, and it accounts for a lot of their business activity. All right, so first thing, review your chart of accounts. Next thing, review your departments, and hopefully You set it and forget it. You don't have to worry about that anymore. Let's get into preferences. You can click this little button here, the preference button, or you can go to edit, click preferences. And the first preference that I'm going to do is, because I want the extra space, is I'm going to get rid of the toolbar. I don't want the toolbar there. So I'll get rid of that. We have a little extra space to work with. You may like the toolbar. Don't forget there's shortcuts. Control A, for example, creates an appointment. Control M, a phone message. Control O, a work order. A lot of us use those buttons, but you can also use the keyboard shortcuts as well. The personalized menus right here, that used to be cool back in the day. Windows, Microsoft wanted us to do that. It's not really a thing anymore, so I would disable it. That way when you click a menu, you see the entire menu and you don't have to click a little button to expand it. The idea was that it was supposed to only show you menu options that you used in the past, but I find it annoying, so I disable mine immediately. You will notice as we move through these preferences and settings that some of them are in blue. And what's that all about? Well, if you haven't heard, that just means that, and I'm hovering over it, maybe you can see the little tooltip that pops up. That means that it also applies to the mobile app, Aptora Mobile 2. If it's not blue, then it doesn't apply. All right, first thing I want to show you is security. And hopefully this is all set up already, but everyone should be enabling security, number one. Notice it's a company preference, so it applies to everybody as opposed to my preference, which would apply to my user login. I don't have any for security. They're all company related, but you should enable security. The password should expire eventually, but I think 30 days is a little bit much for me, too soon, I should say. So 180 days, whatever you prefer, whatever you like, but I would have an expiration date on your password so that the user is forced to enter a new one. And that's what will happen is they will log in and be asked to select a new password. Not a big deal if they forget it. You can always log in if you have permission and change their password to something else. The error logging is usually something that's already set and you don't have to worry about that. This particular preference I want to mention, people are not typically aware of it. Cannot edit users' contact log entries. If you use the feature, the contact log, you probably love it and you realize just how important it is. You can go in and add a contact log entry to a customer, to a job, to a work order, to a vendor, an employee. I mean, you name it. It's all over the place. When I enter a contact log, should you be able to edit my contact log entry? Maybe not. Maybe yes, maybe no. I mean, certain people probably should be able to and others should not. You decide. That's a preference. That's a difference of opinion. A difference of opinion, right? So when we first put the program out 20 years ago, I'm sure we didn't have that. I don't really remember, but I'm just sure we didn't have that. And somebody came along and said, it's ridiculous that you allow this or that you don't allow this. And it became a preference. Require approval to print an email. That's kind of a feature more than a preference. But if you check this, then you are requiring people in your company to get approval to be able to do certain things such as print an email, sales and invoices, estimates, credits, purchase orders. And you can also set a only if over threshold. So it'd be, you got to have approval to print an email, sales and invoices at this company. But it's only if they're over, say, $1,000. And that would apply to everybody in the company. And some people have the ability to reset that, as you'll see in a minute. But that's a feature that's nice when you want to have some control over that. I'll turn that off. So security, number one, be sure you have security enabled. That's really important. Speaking of security, we won't get too much into it, but your security related settings for users is here. So we go to company, we click that. And the list of people that show up are the ones that are already set up. a common question is, well, where is everybody? I've got more employees than this. When you right click and do a new user, you will only see the employees that are not set up. Otherwise, what you're seeing is the ones that are already set up, and you can double click to edit them. I'll double click her and come into that. Now, if I click next, here are all the settings for security, and this is typically where we get that question, isn't there just some button I can click that would give me the settings that most everybody likes? And it doesn't exist. But what you can do, and again, because of the differences of opinion and how people operate things, what you can do is copy from somebody else. So if Andrew and John are the same or close, then I can copy one to the other and then edit as needed. So that's very helpful. But the first couple of people you set up take the longest because there's a lot to think about. Now, if you're the boss and you want to be able to do everything, then you can just click menu, select all, and then you have everything. You could also have, like the number 2 person in your company, you could do a select all and then unselect delete. So nobody should be able to delete. And I don't think anyone should be able to delete. I don't even want me to delete. I should delete logging in when I need to. So I should log in and do my deleting when I need to, but I shouldn't just be able to delete. Most everybody shouldn't need permission to delete anything in the software. If you're an old school accountant, meaning you've been using software going back many, many years, you probably remember using software that did not allow you to delete. You could not delete something. It was not possible. You could void, but chances are, depending on what you were using, if you were using really old school software that was really locked down, you had to do reversing entries. You had to create a reversing invoice, a reversing bill, etc. You couldn't delete anything. We allow you to delete if you have permission. Click next, and here's the rest of that approval process. If you want to give them permission or you want to set them up so they're part of the approval process, then you can do it here. And then there's the administrator bypass authorization. There are times in the software where you try to do something like create an invoice for somebody that's on credit hold, and it might ask you for a password. Well, before this thing came along, we had to enter the admin password. There was only one admin password. But now everyone can have the equivalent of an admin password. They would all be different, but that way when that pops up, I can enter that password for myself if I have this set up, or I can ask one of you to enter yours, and we're not revealing the one and only admin password. All right, so that's how that works. Security. Let's go back to preferences and talk about some of the more important ones. There's no way we will get to every one of them because there's over 1,000 different settings and preferences. And I didn't just make that number up. There really are over 1,000 because we took inventory of them not long ago. And we were all surprised to see how many different settings and preferences there were. The first thing you should be aware of is you can limit access to somebody's ability to change their preferences. That way you could change someone's preferences and they would have to live with them because they couldn't get to the My Preferences tab. Probably what's more important is just limiting access to the company preferences. You probably don't want just anyone to have permission to get to company preferences because then they could turn certain security measures off and turn them back on after they do what they want to do. So limit the company preferences to those who really need to get into company preferences. The first preferences I like to talk about after security is anything that's speed related. One of the common complaints we get about Total Office Manager is that it's slow. Hey, this program is slow. I've used more modern software that's faster. And while that's true, there's a reason, and it's not the age of the software. Speed is not due to the age of the software. The speed issue, and I'll get more into this, is how we took a certain approach to data delivery, to data access. That'll make more sense in just a moment. But the first thing you want to do is if speed is an issue, you want to look at some of the speed related features in the program. But before we do that, let me just show you the dilemma. Let's open up the customer job list. Once upon a time, the customer job list had very few columns. It looked more like this, perhaps. Now, let me open up another one, another program. This one has a lot of data. So the one I was just in, I have all of it set up, but I have no financial transactions in it, or I might have one or two at any given moment. I recommend this, by the way. It's why I'm mentioning it. It's nice to have a copy of a clean database with very few financial records, and then once you're done, you get rid of them so you have no financials. The reason why it's helpful is it's great for training. If I want to show people how accounting works, I can go in and create an inventory part from scratch. I can run the financials. I can then order one, receive it, buy it, pay for it, show them the financials. I can sell it, show them the financials. I can receive payment. I can do bad debt, show people the financials. It's really helpful when you just have a small set of numbers to look at. I'm going to switch between those two today. All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is go back here and get rid of my toolbar, because that'll just open up more room for us. You remember the disabled. I've got that disabled there. The menus. Now what I wanted to do is open up the customer job list, and I realized that other database just didn't have enough to make my point. This one is a lot busier. Now when we first put the program out, as I mentioned, we probably had 5 or 6 columns. I don't know, the important ones, whatever that meant. But then soon people said, I'll tell you what's important. You need to add the zip code. I got to have a zip code. I got to have this. I got to have that. And as we added those columns, the list form, this form here, began to slow down. It took longer to load. It took longer to manipulate. And some of these fields are very resource intensive. Like, for example, financial history, yes or no. That allows you to quickly see who is a customer and who is a prospect, who has spent money and who hasn't. It's just a yes or no. But the software has to go look at the inventory system, basically, to see if you've ever bought anything, if you've ever spent any money. It has to go figure that out. And it takes a while to figure that out. And if you've got 500 customers on here, that's no big deal. If you've got 5,000, that's really not that big a deal. If you have 35,000, then that's a big deal, because it has to ask the question, has this person ever bought anything ever in the history of our company? And your company could be 20 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and you could have 35,000 customers. It has to ask that question 35,000 times for every year you have data, and that can take a while. But if you need that information, by all means, have that column. Another one is SA, yes or no. Do they own a service agreement? Well, of course I have to have that, James. I hear that all the time. But your program is slow. This list is slow. Well, think about it. It has to go back to that same inventory system, and it has to not only see if you bought anything, but it has to see if you bought a service agreement. And it also has to see if it's expired. So it has to look at the date range. It has to figure out if you've bought one SKU for all the years you've been in business, for every customer on the list, and it has to figure out if it was a service agreement. So that's a lot of processing. The other thing I have on here is the balance. So I'm calculating the balance. This is not stored because it's dynamic. It could change. It could change in a few minutes. Somebody could receive a payment in the other room, and it would change right in front of me. But I have to calculate the balance for all of those customers. 5,000 customers, not a problem. But 50,000, that's a problem. Total balance, same thing. So each of these is taking time. And if it's not a problem for you, then don't worry about it. But if you were like, hey, my list is really slow, then it's worth getting rid of columns that you don't need. Another thing that slows it down is the hierarchy in the customer list. You can see that we have a hierarchy, 24-hour fitness. Underneath that, a level 2 or a child, and then we have a job. which is a grandchild of level 3. That's a hierarchy. Well, that takes a lot of time to calculate and present. That hierarchy does. Well, how do you fix it? If you need to, if you don't, forget it. But if you need to, you can go to Form Preferences, Show Columns, and you'll have a list of every column that's available to you. And over the years, we just kept adding columns like subdivisions. Somebody called and said, you got to have subdivisions. This is ridiculous. You don't have subdivisions. Okay, we'll add that. Well, I want the column on there too. Okay, we'll add that. That's how these all got here. If you come in here, you probably should just hit unselect all and then just check the boxes of what you really need. Anything that has an asterisk next to it, such as financial history, that has an asterisk, you can see the little note down here. Anything with an asterisk takes a little bit of extra time to calculate. The rest of them don't take much time at all. It's easy to go get that information, but the ones with asterisks take time. So be aware of that. Get rid of columns that you don't need, and it will make the software faster. Also, rearrange the columns so that the more important columns are where you want them. That is saved by user. Each of these is saved by the user. What columns you have, the arrangement of the columns, the width of the columns, all of that is saved by user. So when you log back in, there it shall be. Now, you might say, gosh, we have a lot of users in our company. It's going to take a lot of time to review those for just everybody, and every list has them. So the work order list has all these extra columns and the asterisks next to the ones that take a lot of time to calculate and so forth. You could go back to preferences here, and you will find in the various settings, let's see, I forgot where that was. In here, oh, there's the easy button. I passed it. All right, so we got an easy button. Hide columns that significantly slow list performance, right there. So when you click that, it unchecks every column for every user that has the asterisk. Now, a lot of people won't even notice you did this. If you click that button, the software should run faster for everybody, because remember, when it's loading lists for one person, it's not doing work for another user. There's only so much bandwidth to go around, right? It's kind of like a plumbing system or an electrical system. There's only so much of that to go around. When you hit that button, it will make things faster for everybody, even for those who put that asterisk selection back, because it just means that there's just less traffic. So click that button. Most people won't care. They won't know the difference. And if they do, they only have to go add that column back. They'll think an update caused the problem, which is pretty common. You click that button, they'll say, ever since we updated, I don't see this column anymore. That was a glitch from Aptora. You don't even have to tell them. We'll keep it a secret. But what you're hoping is people don't notice the difference, except it's a little faster. If you'd like to know more about that, you can click this link and it'll take you to a help topic which will explain it. There's another thing here, list speed optimization. You have two choices that you can read about, but the bottom line is, when you open up your customer job list, do you really need to see 7,421 customers? Are you going to scroll for the customer you're looking for? If the answer is yes, in fact I am, James, then this wouldn't apply to you. But if you find yourself searching for the name here anyway, like you type in part of a name and you want to go search for it, if you do that all the time anyway, then you really don't need to load 7,000, 10,000. Some of you have 100,000 customers. You don't need to load all of those at once, right? If you go search for a toaster on Amazon, they're not going to show you 7,600 toasters. They're going to show you maybe 10. And then you get to the bottom and hit next, and you see 10 more. Or you keep scrolling, called infinite scrolling. You keep scrolling and it loads 10 more, 10 more, 10 more. But it's very unusual to just load an entire list, and we do that by default. So if you go into this setting, you can limit that to say 500 records per page. And that's usually plenty. In fact, you probably don't even need 500. You could just have the list open empty because you're going to have to search anyway, but some people like to see some load in advance, and I think I do as well. So I would encourage you to think about using this feature when you have a lot of records. And this doesn't just apply to customers, it applies to every list. When you turn it on, it will limit every list. It will add paging to the list, and it should make things a lot faster. So between paging and hitting this button right here to get rid of columns you don't need, things are going to get a lot faster. There's other things like that. I won't get into every one of them, but let me just show you a few more. Let's go to customer jobs here. And you have an option, open the customer job list empty. So regardless of those other settings, you could just simply say, look, when I open the customer job list, I just want to open it empty because I'm going to search for what I'm looking for anyway. So why wait for it to load? There's another advantage too, and that is when you have this list in front of you, and this is very important. This is true with all the lists. When you have this list in front of you and you're doing work, or anyone's doing work on a record that is presented on this list. So any work that anyone's doing that would cause this list to become obsolete, the information on the list to become outdated. Anybody that's doing work, like here I am in this customer, and I add something, and I hit save and close. The list then refreshes. And you will wait for that refresh. Now mine's quick because I only have 7,400 records. But if you had, say, 50,000, you would have waited for that list to refresh. And if somebody in the other room made a change, it's going to refresh. And another person is going to refresh. Every single time it's going to refresh. And I've had people just so frustrated because the program was just constantly doing something and they had no idea what is it doing? Look at this. This is ridiculous. Well, they didn't realize that there were people making changes in the company that affected the data on their list. The more columns you have, the more likely it's going to refresh. The more customers, the longer it's going to take. What's the solution? Go into preferences and go to refresh. Go to company preferences and just turn off the auto refresh, or at least tell it to do it every 180 seconds or every 240 seconds, whatever you like. It's in seconds. But get rid of that. I turn mine off. That way, it refreshes for me and me only. Keep in mind, whenever you do a search, it's refreshing. Whenever you right-click and select refresh, it's refreshing. It refreshes as you use it anyway. The key here, though, is it's not refreshing while people in other rooms are making changes to the software. All right, so that's a good tip right there. That applies to all the lists. But you can also, as I mentioned, go in and just say, load it empty. Load my list empty. There's something else that's going on here that was a design decision. Let's open up this store. So let's say that we do business with 24-Hour Fitness and we have this store. Let's open that. Now, by the way, this is taking a while to open, right? That was like, 6 seconds. And people might say, that's really slow. And I would agree, depending on what you're comparing it to, I would agree, but this was the design decision we made early on. When this opens, it's trying to find out if you own a service agreement. It's determining if you have financial history. It's determining if you owe money, the customer owes money, and it's separating the money by current, 1 to 30, 31 to 60, etc. So that takes a lot of time. It's doing all of that in advance. So when you open it up, it's presenting you with all that information in advance. The other thing it's doing, and it probably doesn't need to do this, is it's loading the entire customer list. You could have 50,000 of these. If you've got 7,000, it's not a big deal. But if you had 50, 60, 80,000 customers, it's loading the entire customer list when you went into this record to edit it. But if you went into this record to look at it or edit it, how likely are you to be changing the customer? If you say to me, I never do that, I didn't even know you could. Well, you have the option of not preloading the customer list. That's an option, that's a preference, and that makes the program work faster. That makes the form open quicker, and it reduces the amount of traffic to the server. It just makes everybody a little happier. It's like patching a small water leak. They really add up. So there's preferences that do things like that. The software is preloading all of these lists. You're not waiting for any of them to load. Now, these have little impact because there's not a lot of data, but the one that has a big impact is loading that entire customer list. If you decide not to load it, you will have a reload button up here anyway. So if you decide not to load the list when it opens, you still can load it. You'll have a button that you click to load it, and so nothing's lost. And I'll show you that. Let's go back to preferences, and let's do not load customer jobs on add. And you may not want that one. Do not load customer jobs on edit. So check that one. And then you don't have to hit save. When you check these boxes, they save automatically. So now when you open a customer, it will provide you with the name of that customer, yes, but also a button to look up another customer, or a reload button, depending on where you're at, what list you're working on. So that makes the program open faster, or at least that form open faster. That's a good setting if you're interested in making it a little bit faster. Again, one of the best things you can do is just create a paging scenario so that you're not loading your entire customer list, and then get rid of those columns you don't need. The rest of them are helpful, but those are the two biggies. Let's go to chart of accounts. We talked about chart of accounts earlier. Let's go to company preferences. There is a feature here called use department overhead allocation. If you check that box, the software will add a setting to chart of accounts, and I'm just going to show it to you. When you go into chart of accounts and you open, say, let's just find, well, let me filter that out by expenses. And let's open up this one. You will see a new field when you turn this on, and that is overhead allocation method. It will automatically set it to direct labor. There's a help topic on this. Push F1. As you're staring at this form, push F1. You can read the topic. It'll automatically pick one of these four, department or direct labor, percent of total direct labor. It'll pick that for you. What that means for you is when you go print your income statement, you can have the software automatically allocate this particular item and all the other items. You can have it automatically allocate that overhead, those expenses, to each department, and it'll do it automatically. Again, there's a good help topic on it, and I don't want to get too much into it because I could burn a bunch of time. But starting the new year, if you're not using that feature, you should definitely have that feature. It's a good one. Go to My Preferences, and there is Smart Account Selection Filtering. When you check that box, it will limit the chart of accounts that you can select from while doing certain things in a program. If you're a power user, leave it unchecked because you want to be able to check anything. Or pardon me, you want to be able to select anything if you're a power user because you know what you're doing. But for the average user, they probably don't need to pick certain account types in certain scenarios. This will just limit their selections to the ones that are usually the best choice. So check that box. Now, when that box is checked and I try to uncheck it, it's going to give me a warning of what I'm doing. I'll just show that to you. When you uncheck it, it's going to give you a warning that it's there for your protection and we don't really recommend it. And it writes that to the audit trail, incidentally. So we have a record of you turning that off. And it also requires that admin password. Remember that admin bypass password we talked about earlier? This is where it would be, and you'd have to enter that password. If I don't know the password, it won't let me do that. All right, so I recommend that that be checked in use for most all users. It'll just keep you out of trouble. I think it's a good idea for pretty much everyone. Let's go to customer jobs and have a look at a few settings that you'll really like if you don't know about them. Show work order details on the history form. Show sale invoice estimate details on the history form. What is that? Let's go take a look. Let's go back to that 24-hour fitness, right click, go to history. Now I went to the parent account and there isn't anything to look at because we don't select the parent usually. But I can check this box here and it'll tell me what I'm about to do. Are you sure? And I can say, don't show me that message again. All right, so what it's doing is it's loading the entire family. And that way, you can see the entire family of transactions. For example, this work order. And if we had notes on the work order, they would be displayed here. So you don't have to go look at the work order to see the notes. You would just highlight a work order and you would be able to see all the different notes that are on the work order. Same with all of the sales, if they had any, and they should be putting those in there, right? But if they had notes, you'd see them all right there. And that's what that feature does. I would turn that on for sure. I don't see any disadvantage to that for anybody at all. One, I wrote down on my paper, I didn't want to forget, because Tuesday I was on a coaching call, and I hope they're in watching right now. But Tuesday I was in a coaching call with a client, regular weekly event, and they asked me if they could see a certain piece of information in a certain place. And I showed them the preference, and they were just so thrilled that we had that preference. And I made sure to write it down so I didn't forget to bring it up. But that is in your customer jobs, in my preferences. In here, you have a right down at the bottom, show balance on sales tab in the customer history form. Leave it unchecked for faster performance. You may want to leave it unchecked because you don't want them seeing that info. And why show it to them if it'll make the program faster? But many of you probably want to have that checked, and that way when you go into the customer's history, you will be able to see their balance for invoices and things. Let's just check that out. Let's go into this, go to history. And go to sales. You can see the balance right there. So we can look at all their invoices and quickly see the balance. Now again, because that's calculated, and because we may not know if you're supposed to be able to see such a thing, that's a preference. Yours may or may not be turned on, but if you like having that, by all means, turn that on. And I think that that'll make some of your day. When you load the customer, or pardon me, when you open up your receive payments, well, let's just do it. Let's go to customers, go to receive payments. You may ask yourself, well, why load every single customer, even if they don't owe me money? So one option you have is to tell the software, only load customers that owe me money. I don't want to have to sort through a giant customer list when most of them don't owe me money. So you can turn that feature on to only see those who owe you money. Earlier, I turned the feature on just not to load customers at all. So there you can see I have the lookup, but I also have the reload list. And I'll just click that. and now it reloaded it. So nothing lost. But what I like is I like turning the feature on that says just only show me the people that owe money. I just want to see the ones that owe me money. The only time that can be a bad thing is when a mistake's made and you may not realize it because it looks like they don't owe you money when they should. So that could be a downside to that. All right, let's get into some of the preferences that my coworkers have put on their list. This comes from Caden, user appearance sort list. So let's go to appearance and go to my preferences and take a look at this. Sort list by date in descending order. Well, a lot of people will ask, why is it that when I go into the history of one of my customers, let's just do that. Why is it, and you'll notice it when you have a bunch of them, they might ask, why is it that we are sorting oldest to newest or vice versa? And that's a default. So generally speaking, you want the newest at the top and the oldest at the bottom, but who knows, maybe you have a different opinion, and that's where it's covered. Sort list by date in descending order. So that way you have the newest at the top. Otherwise, you're going to have the oldest at the top. Now, you can always sort by hand, of course. You can click that column and sort while you're in there, but that's a feature that a lot of people are not aware of. The other one Caden has is go to company and items. Let's see. Oh, no, items. Here we go. Go to items, go to company preferences, and there's a feature in here, use item reservation feature, right there. Now, if you're ready for this, there may be bigger fish to fry, but if you're ready for this and turn it on, what it allows you to do is reserve inventory for customers. That would be inventory parts, serialized equipment, etc. In the old days, before software, if we made a sale and we had the piece of equipment in the back, we would take a piece of paper like out of the printer, a blank sheet of paper, and we'd write sold on it. Maybe put my name on there, James, and I would tape that to the box, and hopefully no one would sell that box out from under me, because when we went to do the job and we went and the box was gone, that was a real inconvenience, right? So we would put a sign on there that said sold, and we had a rule. Hopefully they would follow it. They had to go out there and look and see if it had a sold sign on it, and they knew what that meant. Well, we have an electronic version of that. Still not a bad idea to put the sign on that box, by the way, but we have an electronic version of that. That way, if you sell something, you can reserve it, and the software won't let anyone else have it unless you take it off the reservation. Another reason why it's helpful is reserving serial numbers. I might have committed a certain serial number to a job. I might have already delivered it to the job, and until I relieve inventory of that serial number, it's possible that one of you can grab that serial number. So now we have the wrong serial number picked for two different customers. That makes sense. So condensing unit A goes here, condensing unit B goes there, but the serial numbers are reversed. We should have had A go here, B go there. By reserving it, that serial number would not be available. So that allows you to do things like that. As long as I'm in here, let's cover use labor minutes. This was brought to us by John. It's on his suggestion list. When you check that box, you will see a field on your invoice items, pretty much all of them have that field, where you can type in labor minutes, not hours. Had that asked to be a preference, another preference. Could you make a preference that makes labor minutes labor hours? Didn't do that. It's not in there because that turned out to be a lot of work. But it's labor minutes, and yeah, it can get to be a big number because 480 minutes is a whole day. But it really was designed for pipe fittings and for inducer motors and fan motors and thermostats and breakers and all those things that you might want to assign labor minutes to, so that when they're all added up, you have a good idea of what the job will entail as far as labor, but more importantly, its use was flat rate pricing. So that way we could have an hour of labor, 60 minutes. Diagnostic process, we figure 60 minutes. We have a condensing unit fan motor, 60 minutes. A contactor, 20 minutes. A breaker, 20 minutes, etc. And that way the entire task had a certain amount of labor minutes associated with it. And you could do different things with that. You could compare what we thought the labor minutes were with what they actually were. And we can look at that on a monthly basis or daily basis or whatever. But you could also pay people based on the time allotted for the task, which is part of my performance-based compensation system that I believe strongly in. That way people have an incentive to be quick. Well, you can turn that on by checking that box, labor minutes. There's also, as long as I'm in here, enable unit of measure. If you want to introduce a new feature and you're doing inventory control, that's probably a good one. Unit of measure would allow you to buy, say, 100-foot roll of something and sell it by the foot. That makes it a lot easier. Do we have any questions, by the way? I'm looking at my coworkers, Will and Alicia, behind the camera, just making sure we don't have any questions. You're more than welcome to ask questions if you'd like. We're getting towards the end, and you're more than welcome to ask all the questions that you wish. All right, let's go back to John and take a look at his suggestion for, he suggested we require approval to print an email, but we talked about that. And we talked about refresh and the labor minutes. So those were the ones he had. I asked Jace, many of you have talked to him, I asked him what is his opinion, give me 2 or 3. And his were all about speed. And we covered those, making the program faster. Again, just keep in mind, because of the way the software was built, we're preloading a lot of data in these lists and a lot of data in these forms. And the less of it we load, the faster it will get. It'll never be a speed demon because of that design, but it will get a lot faster. Let me show you a real goodie here that is not really a preference or a setting, but it's one of those things very few people know about. Let's go to the invoice list. And again, that delay was acceptable. That was 15,200 invoices. That load time was acceptable. Once it becomes unacceptable, you might say to the software, well, don't show me the total. Don't show me the balance. Don't show me this, that, or the other thing. Don't load all of them at once. Remove some of those columns to make it faster. So let's open up an invoice. And again, the invoice takes a while to open because it's pre-loading all of that information, so you don't have to wait for it once you get in here. All right, here's what I wanted to show you. There's going to be times where you're going to sell equipment, and I'm just going to put a piece of equipment on here. Let's do that. Let's do lookup so I can show you the lookup feature. When you click lookup, you'll have a form like this. You don't have to use it. You can just start typing in the number. But if you come in here, you have options like show me serialized. And that allows me to see serialized that I have in stock. So I can take that one and add that. And let's do another, that one, and add it, and click OK. All right, so I got that on there. Now there's a preference that I absolutely hate with a passion, and the preference says, I don't want to have to pick a serial number. There are some limited times where that is needed for some companies, but most companies abuse it, and you want to force a serial number to be selected. So I selected the serial number. That's a preference if you're interested, but again, I wouldn't use it if you don't absolutely need it. I'm told I've sold serialized inventory, right? Do you want to make that part of the customer's equipment list? Yes, I do. It opens this so that I can double click to add to any of that information if I want to. All right, that's not really the part I wanted to show you. Here's what I want to show you. Now that I've done that, I have something down here towards the bottom that a lot of people aren't aware of. Copy serialized item info to clipboard. Click that. And it says done. All right, now what do I do with it? Anything you want. But what I had in mind was you would go to details right there. resize that if you want, and paste it in. So what did I do? I clicked Menu, Copy Equipment Details, and I just pasted it in. I could have right-clicked and done paste. I did Control-V on my keyboard, but pasted in. That's really helpful for one obvious reason. There's the info. I mean, there's the obvious thing. You can show the customer the info, get rid of whatever part of that information you don't want. It's easier to get rid of the info than to type it in there manually. And a lot of people type that in manually because they need that information not only for the customer, but they need that information for rebates. They need to send this invoice to somebody to get rebates and things like that. So if you ever find yourself needing that info, there you go. That's a fast way to get it onto the invoice. But of course, that copied it to my clipboard so I could have pasted it anywhere that I wanted to.
James, we have a question.
Question, yes, go ahead.
What is enable zone pricing? I don't see that in my preferences.
Enable zone pricing, that allows you, that's a preference that allows you to create pricing for different areas. So you can have pricing for one county or another, or one zip code or another. You name the zone, call the zone anything you want. It could be as simple as zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. But zone pricing just allows you to create pricing per zone. How would you use that? People are using it in a lot of different ways, but one common way to use it is for diagnostic fees, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, zone 4. If we have to drive out to zone 5, the diagnostic fee is higher. Maybe the hourly rate's higher. Maybe the markup on things is higher. You can do what you like. But when you activate the zone pricing, it gives you the ability to have different zones with different pricing matrices.
So she had a follow-up to that. She also mentioned that she doesn't see that in her preferences.
Oh, doesn't see it in the preferences. Okay. So zone pricing, if you click help and go to premium features, it is a premium feature, zone pricing. And normally we charge for that. It's one of those extras that you don't really need unless you need it. But if you can click to activate it and see if your company already has it. And it might say something like that. I clicked the wrong one, click that one. And see if you can get it. And that'll turn it on, and then the preference will be enabled, the preference will be available. You can then turn the preference on and take advantage of that.
And then she had one more. She said, can a mobile user have access to that for creating purchase orders, copy serial / model, etc.?
The question was, on the copy paste thing that I just showed you, is that available in mobile? And it is not. That's not in mobile. It's a good idea, though, to put that in mobile. And I definitely would be for that because it's a time saver. Speaking of time savers, I think one of the last things I wanted to show you, and I'm in no hurry to get out of here. All right, so if you have other questions, that's good. People, as I mentioned, ask all the time, why is it so difficult to set up all these preferences and these settings? And we were having all this trouble and found out it was just a setting, just a preference. Can't you do it for me? There's times where I've been on site with a client and they're like, can't you just do it for me? One thing I like to tell them is that when your company has standard operating procedures, it makes it way easier to figure out what the different settings would be. So if your company handed me SOP, I probably could do that. So could tech support, so could a trainer. And let me give you an example. In my SOP example here, let's just scroll down, go past these. This is a smaller version of the whole SOP for teaching purposes. So I skipped to chapter 3, scheduling and dispatching a demand service call. This is our company's rule book on how to do it. Like if you've ever worked fast food, like McDonald's, I've worked fast food, my wife worked fast food at McDonald's, they have SOP for everything. You don't just put pickles on a cheeseburger, you put a certain amount of pickles, a certain number, and you put a certain number of napkins in a bag, depending on how many sandwiches went in that bag. Well, that's their standard operating procedure that they're famous for. That's why I brought up McDonald's. But we need SOP as well. And we start with what's the most important thing around here. Well, we could argue that that's dispatching, scheduling and dispatching for service calls. Well, we need an SOP. Do you need 2 monitors, 1 monitor? Is 1 monitor okay? Is a 13-inch monitor okay? Or do we need to make sure you have a 25-inch monitor? Do you need 2, 3? All of that goes into the SOP. And the SOP talks about how you answer the phone. Well, it also talks about how you search for customers. Do you search for customer by last name, first name, phone number, email address, all of it, none of it? And you keep going. So again, the SOP lays out the entire workflow for answering the phone. Thank you for calling Mr. HVAC. This is James. How may I help you? That's in the SOP. Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm glad you called. May I have your mobile phone number, please? Or whatever. And once you do that, though, it makes all the settings a lot easier, especially for the mobile app. So in the mobile app, here's our SOP, how we dispatch, how they lift, how they clock in, lift the work order, how they clock in, how they present the flat rate price, etc. Now that we know all that, then it's easy to set up the permissions. Here's every permission and setting that has to be checked and how. And it just goes on and on. It's easy because I know what they need. So according to my company's SOP, this is everything they need to do the SOP. And that way, any manager can set someone up. But remember, there's a copy from feature so that if I have Will and we hire Alicia, and Alicia is going to be running service calls just like Will does, following the same SOP, I just go find Will and hit the copy button and copy Will over to Alicia and hit save and I'm done. But if I'm starting from scratch, here it is. I even have all the copy-paste terms and conditions, just copy and paste into there. Now these all work perfectly if you follow the SOP. If that SOP was perfect, then all of these settings are perfect. Even the footer is perfect. The footer is perfect if the SOP is perfect. But every bit of it's covered in the SOP because the SOP lays out how you do things. I'll give you another example of how to put all this together. Let's say in the SOP that you search by phone number, all. And so you type in their phone number. I'm just going to type in I'll type in the whole. I'll type in a number. All right, they're not in there. I right click, I do new customer. And I'm going to put this customer in because they've never called before. And it'd just be nice if the phone number was in there, right? I already entered the phone number. Why not just put the phone number in there? There's a preference for that. There's a preference to add the phone number or the address or whatever you searched for to a new record. That's a preference. Well, again, if I knew the SOP, I could easily set that preference. But yeah, there's a preference for that. Why is it a preference? Somebody wants to ask me. People were annoyed by it. People were annoyed. They were like, I'm sick of this. You got a weird bug that I open up a new record and it's got the address in there. It got the phone number in there, and I don't like it. We had to make it a preference. But there is a preference that you can turn on that just puts that info in there. My point being that the more we establish a way of doing things, the easier it is to set up the software for those things. One of the most common time-consuming events when I'm on site with somebody or working with somebody on the internet is all the conversation that takes place about how to run the company before we can even talk about how to use the software. Because so much of it is, well, who's going to do what and what do they need permission to get into and so forth. So work on SOP for the important stuff, and the settings and preferences will be a lot easier. Other questions?
We're good.
All right. Well, my cheat sheet says I've covered everything. That is all we have for you today. Again, I'm James Leichter, and I really appreciate you coming to these monthly webinars. I want to thank Alicia and Will behind the camera who make it all possible. We really enjoy having you as a customer, and I will look forward to seeing you in a month. Goodbye.